At the helm of President Trump's effort is Elon Musk, one of the most successful entrepreneurs ever. For decades and on a bipartisan basis, members of this committee have lamented the inefficiency of the federal bureaucracy. We fought never-ending battles against the waste, fraud, and abuse the bureaucracy generates during both Republican and Democrat administrations. One byproduct of this inefficiency, according to GAO, is the near $250 billion in annual improper payments the government issues. But now that President Trump is taking action to drain the swamp and expose how the federal government is spending taxpayer money, which he was elected to do, Democrats are hyperventilating and sensationalizing it. Over the past few days, we've heard wild claims from Democrats that we are, quote, at the beginning of a dictatorship, end quote, and we are in a constitutional crisis. This kind of theatrical rhetoric is exactly what the American people rejected in November. Americans know that Washington needs reform, and DOGE is taking inventory to bring about change and steward taxpayer dollars entrusted to the federal government. Real innovation is not clean and tidy. It's necessarily disruptive and messy. But that's exactly what Washington needs right now. And it's what the American people voted for in November, a departure from the broken status quo. This committee intends to work in partnership with DOGE. We want to reinforce its efforts and not blunt the momentum it's generating for needed change to the federal bureaucracy. At the Oversight Committee, our core mission remains unchanged, identifying waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, and proposing solutions to make it more efficient and effective for the American people. For this Congress, we created a subcommittee chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene that is dedicated to working with DOGE. But I expect all of our subcommittees will participating in this effort to make Washington more accountable. I'm hopeful that we can find some common ground with our Democrat colleagues to ensure the federal government more efficiently and effectively serves the American people. I ask all my colleagues here today, who among us believes that the federal government operates at peak efficiency? The federal government has expanded dramatically since the early years of our republic. There are today more than 400 executive branch agencies and sub-agencies, and roughly 1,000 federal commissions. Most of these entities are relatively new creations. They did not exist for most of our nation's history. Not only has the government grown in size and complexity, but it has also taken on many functions once handled by the states or even the private sector. How did we get here? Tom Schatz, the president of the Citizens Against Government Waste, and one of our witnesses today, notes that Congress tends to respond to each new problem that arises by creating a new program or agency. And even if the problem goes away, the program or agency remains. Congressional authorizing committees tend to generate these new programs and entities all too often without sufficient regard to similar federal activities occurring outside of their jurisdiction. Over time, the expansion of entities and programs has yielded an increasingly complex bureaucracy with a massive amount of overlap and duplication. For instance, the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, recently found 43 job training programs scattered across 9 different federal agencies. That's just one of dozens of areas of wasteful duplication the GAO has identified across a range of federal activities. I hope we can learn today from Governor Kim Reynolds, who proposed her own wide-ranging reorganization in Iowa, which the state legislature enacted. For example, she will detail how Iowa consolidated a host of state-level job training programs. Iowa's reorganization also eliminated or consolidated a slew of state agencies, commissions, and vacant positions. Iowa's example shows that the chief executive of any unit of government, federal, state, or local, is well positioned to propose ways to streamline that government. After all, they're the ones who run it on a day-to-day basis. At the federal level, the president has considerable authority within existing law to reorganize government offices and functions. That's the case, for instance, with respect to USAID. But some reorganizations do require changes in law. throughout our nation's history. Such reorganization legislation typically originated from the White House. That's in part because for much of the 20th century, presidential reorganization proposals requiring changes in law were granted special consideration by Congress. I think renewing that special authority, requiring Congress to take an up or down vote on reorganizations proposed by the president, would help facilitate needed improvements in government operations. In the meantime, I look forward to learning more about keys to successful reforms for our witnesses during today's hearing. I now yield to Ranking Member Conley for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our government was designed to be by, of, and for the American people. It's made up of civil servants who take an oath to serve the American people and to support and defend the Constitution. More than 1 in 3 federal workers is employed by either the Postal Service, ensuring every American can get mail, or the Department of Veterans Affairs, providing care to our veterans in VA hospitals, clinics, and nursing homes. Almost 1 in 3 federal workers is a veteran, and more than 85% live outside of the D.C. metropolitan area across every state and serving every community in America. 1 in 3 Americans and half of all American children are enrolled in a government program. Our government provides the support these Americans are counting on, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, Head Start, the National School Lunch Program. We depend on our government to safeguard our food supply and to ensure life-saving medication is safe to consume. We depend on our government to provide alerts about extreme weather through the National Weather Service, which you know all too well from the tornado that devastated your community, Mr. Chairman, a few years ago, and to provide disaster relief to communities where it's needed, such as in Los Angeles and the devastating fires of the last few weeks. This is the so-called deep state that President Trump and his acolytes continue to demonize, and these are the programs and services sitting on Elon Musk's chopping block right now. Their efforts to, quote, right-size government serve no one but themselves and fellow oligarchs who want to destroy, deregulate, and privatize, leaving everyday Americans to foot the bill with not only their paychecks, but even potentially their well-being and their lives. Just last week, the country watched in horror as a commercial aircraft and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided over the Potomac River, killing 67 people, including several of my constituents, including young children. We know that disasters are more likely to happen when the agencies that ensure our safety are unsupported and under-resourced. Our nation's air traffic control facilities were already operating below recommended staffing levels. But one day, before the horrific crash, the Trump administration sent an email to more than 2 million federal employees, offering them a purported financial incentive to immediately quit their jobs. Can you imagine what might yet happen if our air traffic controllers accept this offer to quit en masse? This is just the tip of the iceberg. In its first 2 weeks, the Trump administration has ordered a hiring freeze on all federal civilian positions, ordered all federal employees back to the office full-time, unless, of course, you take their early retirement offer, and then you don't have to come to work for 8 months. Paved the way to purge more than 100,000 nonpartisan career civil servants and replace them with political loyalists, and wage war on our nation's commitment to civil rights by eviscerating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The new administration also ordered the politicization of the senior executive service, forced employees to surveil and report on colleagues, and fired the Democratic commissioners of the National Labor Relations Board and the Equal Opportunity Commission. They administered loyalty tests to career civil servants at the National Security Council, granted security clearances to incoming White House officials without vetting, reportedly violated cybersecurity procurement and privacy laws by recklessly handing federal systems and data, and attempted a late-night purge of 17 nonpartisan inspectors general, a brazenly illegal act that will only provide cover for the corruption that inevitably will ensue. The Trump administration also ordered a freeze of federal grants, loans, and other financial assistance programs immediately after the funding freeze was issued. Medicaid and Head Start reported disruptions, and some of FEMA's online portals were cut off. Although the freeze was halted by a judge and then rescinded by the administration, we saw in only 48 hours how willing this administration is to threaten the health, safety, and security of Americans in service of its unlawful and partisan agenda. If these initiatives sound familiar, it's because so many of them are ripped right out of the Project 2025 playbook. Remember the deeply unpopular tone that President Trump, as candidate Trump, desperately tried to distance himself from during the campaign. Many of these executive orders mirror Project 2025 proposals, and at least 4 prominent 2025 authors now have top positions in the administration. Trump's disavowal of Project 2025 was just part of the con. President Trump and Elon Musk are using a wrecking ball to systematically dismember the government piece by piece. The American people deserve better, and we in Congress have a constitutional duty to uphold the laws that we created. We must protect the government, workers, programs, and services that the future of this country depends on, and stop an unconstitutional assault on the government. Mr. Chairman, you correctly cited the role of Elon Musk. It's a puzzling role for many people, certainly on this side of the aisle, and I think for some on yours. Who is this unelected billionaire that he can attempt to dismantle federal agencies, fire people, transfer them, offer them early retirement, and have sweeping changes to agencies without any congressional review, oversight, or concurrence? Therefore, Mr. Chairman, given his prominence and his importance, I move that the committee subpoena Elon Musk to come before it as a witness at the earliest possible moment. And I so move.
There's been a motion and second. The motion is not debatable.
Mr. Chairman, why is it not debatable? Point of order.
It is debatable.
Mr. Chair, I can strike the last word.
Hold on.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, why don't we want to debate Elon Musk coming in and talking to us about his work and how he's enriched himself for $64 billion?
There's
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to table the motion.
There's
I
a
second.
motion to table. There's a
Mr.
second.
Chairman,
Second by
point of
Mr.
order.
Higgins.
Point of order.
Now,
Mr.
the
Chairman.
motion is not debatable, as many
Point of order, Mr.
are in
Chairman.
favor of tabling. Point of order, state your point.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's outrageous that this committee will not even entertain a motion.
No, you state your. Chairman, that's not a point of order.
Somebody
You know,
who's breaking the law
Point
and
of order.
dismantling our federal agencies
Point of order.
requiring
Point of
federal
order.
agents to have data,
Out of
and
order.
you will not
Out of order.
even
Out of order.
entertain a motion
The
to
motion
bring
of
this
order
in
in the
front
state
of
of
the
agree. This is
oversight
all
committee.
are in favor of tabling.
Yes,
signify.
let's have order in this country.
Shakespeare, you're out of order. You know you're out of order. You know the rules of this committee. There's been a motion.
Mr.
and a
Elon
second
Musk
to
is
table.
out of order and
He's
dismantling.
out of order.
I call the question.
There's been a motion and second. Motion by Dr. Fox, second by Mr. Higgins to table. All those in favor of tabling signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion
Mr.
is
Chairman,
tabled.
I ask for a recorded
A
vote.
recorded vote is ordered. We will set up for the clerk to call the roll. we'll stay at ease when we get the staff ready to go for this.
For those watching at home, they don't have the votes in the room.
Mr. Chairman, speaking of efficiency of our time, since we're just sitting here, I would love to hear from someone why we don't want to have Mr. Musk come testify.
Gentleman's not recognized. This is a committee hearing about eliminating wage fraud and abuse. You pulled a parliamentary move, which you have the right to do. This wasn't expected. It wasn't in the agenda. We're trying to print everything and get it ready to have the roll call vote.
Well, speaking of abuse, we have someone
Mr. Chairman, he's out of order.
Federal programs
You're out of order.
benefiting billions
Chairman,
of
he's
dollars.
out of order. This is just a mindset.
Mr. Chairman.
I agree again.
Can you control the other side? They're out of control.
I'm trying.
Hashtag irony.
Mr. Chairman, it appears the clerk is ready for roll call. Mr. Jordan. Mr. Turner. Mr. Gosar. Ms. Fox.
Fox votes aye to table.
Ms. Fox votes aye. Mr. Grothman. Mr. Cloud. Mr. Cloud votes aye. Mr. Palmer. Mr. Higgins. Mr. Higgins votes aye. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Biggs. Mr. Biggs votes aye. Ms. Mace. Ms. Mace votes aye. Mr. Fallon. Mr. Fallon votes aye. Mr. Donalds. Mr. Perry. Mr. Timmons. Mr. Burchett. Mr. Burchett votes aye. Ms. Green. Ms. Green votes aye. Ms. Boebert. Ms. Luna. Mr. Langworthy. Mr. Burleson. Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane votes aye. Mr. Jack. Mr. McGuire. Mr. McGuire votes aye. Mr. Gill. Mr. Gill votes aye. Mr. Connolly.
Nay.
Mr. Connolly votes nay. Ms. Norton.
No.
Ms. Norton votes no. Mr. Lynch. Mr. Lynch votes no. Mr. Krishnamurthy. Mr. Krishnamurthy votes no. Mr. Khanna. Mr. Mfume. Ms. Brown.
Brown votes no. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, voting no to table.
Ms. Brown votes no. Ms. Stansbury,
I vote no to a motion that would table a subpoena for Elon Musk.
More demagoguery.
It's out of order to discuss what the motion is? Okay, guys.
It's out of order. All right, order. All right, let's go.
Ms. Stansbury votes no. Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia votes no. Mr. Frost. Mr. Frost votes no. Ms. Lee. Ms. Lee votes no. Mr. Kassar.
No on the motion to table our motion to have Elon Musk at this committee.
Mr. Kassar votes no. Ms. Crockett.
No on giving the American people the transparency that they deserve by bringing this
Demagoguery again.
before us.
No.
Ms. Crockett votes no. Ms. Randall. Ms. Randall votes no. Mr. Subramaniam.
No.
Mr. Subramaniam votes no. Ms. Ansari.
No.
Ms. Ansari votes no. Mr. Bell.
No.
Mr. Bell votes no. Ms. Simon.
No.
Ms. Simon votes no. Mr. Min.
Min is a hard no.
Mr. Min votes no. Ms. Presley.
Yeah.
Ms. Presley votes no. Ms. Tlaib.
I decided to put my residents before Elon Musk, and I'm voting no.
Ms. Tlaib votes no. Mr. Chairman.
I vote yes, and
Mr. Chairman votes yes.
Mr. Chairman, how am I recorded?
yeah. Who recognized?
Mr. Chairman, how am I recorded?
Oh, has Mr. Timmons been reported?
Mr. Timmons is not recorded.
Aye.
Mr. Timmons votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, how am I recorded? Representative Perry?
Mr. Perry is not recorded.
Representative Perry votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, how is
Mr. Perry votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, how is Boebert recorded?
Ms. Boebert is not recorded.
Boebert votes aye.
Ms. Boebert votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, how is Burleson recorded?
Mr. Burleson is not recorded.
Votes aye.
Mr. Burleson votes aye.
How is Mr. Grothman recorded?
Mr. Grothman is not recorded.
I'll vote aye.
Mr. Grothman votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, how is Mr. Gosar recorded?
Mr. Gosar is not recorded.
Aye.
Mr. Gosar votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, how is Mr. Donalds recorded?
Mr. Donalds is not recorded.
Aye.
Mr. Donalds votes aye.
How has Mr. Jack been recorded?
Mr. Jack is not recorded.
Mr. Chairman, vote aye, please.
Mr. Jack votes aye.
Are there any other members who have not been recorded? Any members who wish to change their votes? We have a member en route.
One.
Will the clerk please tally the report, the roll call?
Mr. Chairman, on this vote, the ayes are 20, the nays are 19.
The ayes have it, and the motion fails. And I might add, Mr. Ranking Member, you all could have invited Mr. Musk to be your minority witness, but you all chose to have a college professor, which is what you normally choose to have as a witness at any hearing, and that's fine. But you all had an opportunity to invite Elon Musk, and you chose not to. So,
Mr. Chairman, could I just
Yes.
respond? Thank you. You make a point, but from our point of view, given the prominence Mr. Musk has been given by President Trump in this administration, sweeping unprecedented powers, from our point of view, he is not a minority witness. He ought to be a full committee witness because of the prominence and the role he's playing, and subject to the oversight and scrutiny of this committee. Thank you.
I ask unanimous consent that Representative Nunn from Iowa be waived on to the committee for today's hearing for the purpose of asking questions. Without objection, so ordered. The next order of business is ratifying the subcommittee roster for the 119th Congress. The clerks have distributed the roster electronically. I ask unanimous consent that the committee approve the appointments and assignments as shown on the roster. Without objection, so the subcommittee roster is approved. I'm pleased to welcome an expert panel of witnesses who each bring experience and expertise that will be valuable to today's discussion. I'd first like to welcome the 43rd Governor of the great state of Iowa, Governor Kim Reynolds. Since assuming office in 2017, Governor Reynolds has instituted numerous reforms to reorganize state-level operations to better serve the people of Iowa. I'd now like to recognize Representative Nunn from Iowa to welcome the governor here.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much for this committee for having the governor of Iowa join us today. When President Trump was elected, he asked for three things: secure our community, unleash our natural energy, and make sure that we reform government to put money back in taxpayers' pocket. They need look no further than what Governor Reynolds has done with our state legislature when I served as a senator in Iowa. During Governor Reynolds' time, she has helped lead us out of a massive Democrat-caused debt to be able to balance the state's budget, to be able to provide fiscal responsibility that right-sized our community, and provide tax cuts that put more of Iowans' hard-earned tax dollars right back in their britches. So with this, Iowa is now one of the most well-managed citizen-led democracies, Mr. Chairman, in the world. It has resulted in a balanced budget of over $9 billion in our general fund, as well as a $1 billion rainy day fund, with more tax returns on the way, after she led the three largest tax cuts in state history. Governor Reynolds, we want to say thank you very much as a citizen of Iowa. Not only are you a great governor, but your examples help us lead to real solutions that could address a $36 trillion debt right here at the national level. All it takes is one hero from the heartland to be able to come here and show Washington how business can get done. So with that, Governor Reynolds, thank you for making government efficient again in Iowa. It's a best practice we can take in a playbook right here in D.C. We welcome you to the committee.
Very good. Next we have Tom Schatz, President of the Citizens Against Government Waste. Tom spent over 36 years at Citizens Against Government Waste, identifying areas of waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement in government, and this helped save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars. Finally, we have William G. Resch, who is an associate professor at the University of Southern California. Saul Price School of Public Policy, has been a member of the USC faculty since 2014. I want to thank each of the witnesses for being here today, and I'll look forward to your all's testimony. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you all. You may take a seat. We appreciate you all being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now recognize Governor Reynolds for her opening statement.
First, let me thank Congressman Nunn for your kind words, and thank you for your service. Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Conley, members of the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. Since this hearing is about government efficiency, I'll get right to the point. Iowa was doing Doge before Doge was a thing. When I was elected to office in 2018, our tax structure was uncompetitive. Our top income tax rate was 8.98%, one of the highest in the nation, as was our 12% corporate rate. Antiquated state policies made our tax code complex and hard to reform. Soon after President Trump signed TCJA into law, I signed legislation that eliminated federal deductibility, cut rates across the board, provided for additional reductions in future years, and reduced the number of income tax brackets. After 4 more historic reforms, Iowa taxpayers today pay a flat income tax rate of 3.8%. Our corporate rate is moving to a 5.5%, and we've eliminated tax on retirement and inheritance income. Over 10 years, Iowans will save an estimated $24 billion in a state with an annual budget of about $10 billion. But it's not enough just to cut taxes. You have to make sure that they're sustainable, especially if you want to keep reducing them. The growth they create helps, but you also need to keep spending in government in check. And I've worked closely with our General Assembly to do just that. In fact, the Cato Institute has ranked Iowa the most fiscally responsible state in the country for 3 years running. But that wasn't always the case. When we started our alignment work in 2022, state operations had not been reviewed for 40 years, and it showed. Layers of bureaucracy had accumulated over decades, expanding government beyond its core function. We were too big, too fragmented, and too inefficient. One example became clear during COVID, where the separation of our public health and human services departments resulted in both duplication and gaps in service. We merged them into the Department of Health and Human Services in 2022, the first big step in our work to align state government. It was a successful proof of concept and a roadmap as we saw similar misalignment across state government. We had 11 separate state agencies operating workforce programs. 136 professional licensing functions were spread across 11 agencies. Our administrative code had ballooned to more than 20,000 pages, with 190,000 restrictive terms. At one point, I discovered that the state owned a cow-calf operation, and to make matters worse, it operated at a loss. Given our limited staff and scope of the initiative, we partnered with an outside firm while bringing agency directors and their staff into the discussion early, and we asked the hard questions that bring about accountability and change. What is the core mission of each agency? How is it funded? How is it staffed? And what does it own? Are the programs working? How did the structure of the agency compare to other states? Is there duplication or misalignment? Next, we benchmarked Iowa against our neighboring states as well as those with similar populations and budgets. We found that my 37-member cabinet was the most, by far, while our expenditures on a per capita basis were the third highest. In 2023, we introduced a 1,300-page bill that passed with only one technical amendment and took effect less than a year after we began the process. I also initiated a moratorium on new rulemaking and ordered a comprehensive review of all rules already on the books. Together, these actions cut 21 agencies from my cabinet, eliminated 600 open positions, removed 1,200 regulations in year one, and identified 4,700 acres of state-owned farmland to sell. Nearly all licensing functions are now in one agency, and we're currently in the process of consolidating 6 separate licensing platforms into one. One agency that operated out of 10 buildings now operates out of just one. Altogether, we've saved taxpayers $217 million in just 18 months, surpassing our initial projections for the first 4 years. And our government isn't just smaller, it's better. Getting your medical license recognized used to take 65 days, now it takes 3. Unemployment case rulings used to take 3 months, now it takes 11 days. Moving our motor vehicle enforcement unit into the Department of Public Safety put 100 more state troopers on the road. After aligning agencies, we then streamlined our system of boards and commissions, cutting 83 boards, about a third of the boards and commissions. We also brought IT systems spread across 20 different agencies into one department. And last year, we consolidated 32 substance use and mental health regions into 7 unified behavioral health regions, resulting in greater investment on the ground and treatment delivered to Iowans when and where they need it. And now we're taking yet another step. I recently announced my intention to launch an Iowa Doge to continue reducing the cost of government, maximizing the return on taxpayers' investment. Like most Americans, I'm thrilled by the priority that President Trump is placing on shrinking government and making it work better. Not only do I believe Iowa is a model, but I'm committed to doing everything I can to help in the months ahead, and I look forward to working with you in the Trump administration to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. I now recognize Mr. Schatz for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Connolly, for the opportunity to testify today. Citizens Against Government Waste was founded following the report of the Grace Commission under President Ronald Reagan. The last time there was a comprehensive review of the federal government by the private sector. The Commission made 2,478 recommendations that would save $424.4 billion over 3 years. Since CAGW was created to follow up on the Grace Commission recommendations, we have helped save taxpayers $2.4 trillion through the implementation of Grace Commission and other cost-saving recommendations. The taxpayers' hard-earned money should be spent in the most effective manner possible, following the objectives set forth in statutes enacted by Congress and carried out by the executive branch. Success should be measured by whether the intended results are being achieved. If that does not occur, the program should be reevaluated to determine if it needs to be modified, consolidated, or terminated. The solution should not be to spend more money on that program, create another program, or duplicate what the private sector is already doing. The proper size of government can be determined after those actions are taken, but that is unfortunately not how it works now. Despite the availability of recommendations from both within the government, including the Congressional Budget Office, Government Accountability Office, and Inspectors General, as well as non-governmental sources like CAGW's Prime Cuts, which would save $5.1 trillion over 5 years, not enough is being done. There is no lack of ideas, just a lack of action by Congress to determine which programs are most effective and efficient, leading to the appropriate size and scope of the federal government. President Trump campaigned on a platform of making the government more efficient, including his promise to create a Department of Government Efficiency. The establishment of DOGE, along with the DOGE Subcommittee and House and Senate DOGE caucuses, should lead to the adoption of policies that will establish more effective use of taxpayer dollars and more efficient delivery of government services. Another method to drive efficiency would be to give the President greater reorganization authority, as the Chairman has noted. This was first provided in 1947, and Congress established what became known as the Hoover Commission to develop recommendations to increase efficiency and improve the organizational structure of the government after World War II. And comparing the debt to a GDP ratio then and now, it's fairly close, so it is certainly time to do this again. According to a 2012 Congressional Research Service report, presidents used this authority regularly, submitting more than 100 plans between 1932 and 1984. The last president to receive reorganization authority was Ronald Reagan, and the last one to use it was Jimmy Carter. In May 2024, GAO released its annual report on ways to reduce duplication, overlap, and fragmentation of programs. The report listed 112 new items and noted that $667 billion had been saved since the first report was issued in 2011. CAGW has long maintained that Congress should not only hold hearings in this committee, but across committees that have multiple jurisdiction over a lot of the programs identified by GAO, and then vote on those recommendations. And GAO reports about duplicative spending provide other opportunities to improve efficiencies. A May 10th, 2023 GAO report found 133 federal programs across 15 agencies that have the goal of increasing broadband access and bridging the digital divide. These programs should be assessed to determine which are inefficient and ineffective, and funds should then be directed to those programs that can deploy broadband to every remaining unserved and underserved business and household across the country that wishes to be connected to the internet. And broadband is one of many programs included in CAGW's Critical Waste Issues for the 119th Congress, which was released this morning. The report contains 12 policy areas, including greater accountability and transparency, budget reform, earmarks, healthcare, privacy, technology, and telecommunications. I want to also remind the committee of CAGW's concerns about the U.S. Postal Service, which we provided in testimony submitted for the record for the December 10th, 2024 oversight hearing. Right-sizing government is an objective on which all members of Congress should agree. It requires constant vigilance and oversight to determine if federal tax dollars are being spent in the most effective and efficient manner and achieving intended objectives. Increased efficiency will go a long way to restore the public's confidence in the ability of the federal government to avoid as much waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement as possible. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Dr. Risch. And make sure your microphone's on.
Okay. Sorry. Mr. Chairman,
And if you don't care, pull it to you. If It's okay, yeah. Now we're in business.
All right, thank you. I'm so sorry. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me, Ranking Member Conley, and committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to address you today on the critical issue of right-sizing government that takes place amongst recent administrative actions that I find somewhat troubling, not just myself, but according to the literature, the scholarship, and observations through history, that show that these types of actions threaten integrity, effectiveness, and stability of our federal workforce. For decades, debates over the size of government have focused too narrowly on a head count of civilian employees, which obscures a more pressing concern, the growing misalignment between federal responsibilities and the government's capacity to manage them. While the number of civilian federal employees has remained stable at around 2.4 million, not including postal workers, federal spending has increased fivefold since the 1960s. More than $759 billion was spent on contracts in 2023 alone, and this is relatively small in comparison to the last year of the first Trump administration, where estimates were as high as $1.2 trillion in contracts, meaning that much of what government does today is carried through private firms rather than through career civil servants. Some estimate that there is as many as 3 to 4 contract employees for every federal civil servant, and this shift has weakened oversight, increased inefficiencies, and created accountability gaps, leaving taxpayers footing the bill for cost overruns on contracts, delays, and policy failures that come not from incompetence of the civil service, but from incapacity. At the same time, civil servants are underpaid relevant to their private sector counterparts, earning on average 23% less than similarly qualified professionals in the private sector. The salary gap, combined with mounting political pressures and the expanding scope of government responsibilities, has made it increasingly difficult to attract and retain top talent. This is particularly concerning given that 70% of federal employees work in national security roles, 80% serve outside of Washington, providing vital services to the communities across the country. And despite these challenges, recent administrative actions threaten to destabilize the civil service further by increasing politicization and eroding the principles of professional nonpartisan workforce. The so-called policy/career reclassification would strip job protections from tens of thousands of career civil servants, allowing them to be dismissed and replaced with political appointees at will. And this risks creating a climate of fear and self-censorship, where professionals hesitate to provide objective, evidence-based advice for fear out of political retaliation. History and research are clear. Governments that rely on merit-based civil service systems perform better. They're less prone to corruption and deliver more effective public services. By contrast, increased politicization, substituting experienced professionals with short-term political loyalists, reduces efficiency, complicates long-term planning, and increases the risk of policy failures. Beyond inefficiency, politicization weakens the very mechanisms that ensure accountability and integrity in government. Civil servants are often the last line of defense against waste, fraud, and abuse, ensuring that government funds are spent wisely and in accordance with the law. When experienced professionals are replaced by individuals selected for political loyalty rather than expertise, government oversight erodes and leads to costly mismanagement and a decline in public trust. This dynamic is not theoretical. It is played out in past administrations and has been extensively documented in research. Countries that move toward greater political control over bureaucracies see decline in effectiveness, increased regulatory capture, and greater difficulty in responding to crises. Conversely, nations that invest in independent professional civil service see better policy outcomes, stronger economic growth, and higher public confidence. The U.S. has long benefited from stable, merit-based civil service that has helped sustain democracy through times of war, economic upheaval, and national crises. Attempts to weaken the system, rather than whether it's through mass firings, loyalty-based appointments, or the dismantling of institutional safeguards, do not lead to a more effective government. Instead, they result in greater instability, inefficiency, and governance failures that harm all Americans. In conclusion, any discussion of right-sizing government must grapple with the structural transformation that has already been underway. Rather than reducing the number of career civil servants or subjecting them to politically motivated purges, we should reinvest in the workforce to ensure that government functions effectively, remains accountable, and serves the public interest. The evidence overwhelmingly supports one clear lesson, that it is strengthening, not weakening, the civil service as the surest path to effective and democratic government that works for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now begin our questions. The chair recognizes Dr. Gosar from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here today to tame the labyrinth of the federal bureaucracy. That's why I was elected, and frankly, that's why President Trump was reelected this past November. More responsible government spending means less need for taxation on the American people. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have claimed cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse will include cuts to Social Security and Medicare. However, promoting efficiency and cutting wasteful spending actually protects Social Security and Medicare by ensuring available and continued funding. And if they have any more doubts, I would invite them to sign on to my LASSO Act that actually puts these decisions out of the public arm and into the public domain. When Elon Musk acquired Twitter, now X, in 2022, he fired about 6,000 employees, or nearly 80% of his workforce. But there was no lapses in X's management, but perhaps only less community notes and less removal of unlawful lawful political speech. Elon Musk trimmed the fat on X, and we have the opportunity to do the same here in Washington. Governor Reynolds, not only did you lead a successful state-level government reorganization, but you did it twice. Congratulations. My question to you is, how did you identify waste, and were members of the state legislature empowered to also identify those areas with you?
Thank you for the question. It was definitely a collaborative effort. It started with the tax cuts, so we did comprehensive reform there, and as a manner to sustain it, then we needed to look at the overall government. When you coupled COVID on top of that and the inefficiencies that I saw in our response to COVID, it led us to start looking at processes in the state government. And so, we brought, and they were common sense changes too. When we were looking at licensing, when we were looking at IT spread across 20 different agencies, I mean, the list went on and on. It made sense to restructure it. So what we did is we brought first of all, we brought our agencies in and their team and had them do an overall review of their operation, asking the tough questions that really leads to accountability and change. And then on top of that, because we are a small team, we also brought in an outside consultant to help us with the comparisons and help manage it. And then we worked closely with the legislature for any ideas that they may have. We spent a lot of time walking through the bill in its entirety. We put, when we were working with our agencies, that gave us an opportunity to understand where some of the pushback might be, so we could also get in front of that with the answers to the questions that might be posed from realigning a state government. But it's made us more efficient, it's made us more effective, it is common sense. I think the data is proving out, we're seeing it every day, so we'll have data to actually point to on how we are more efficient and more effective, and we're taking dollars from the administration and from the bureaucracy, and we're actually putting it into programs, getting it on the ground, and putting it into people. So it's been very efficient from that perspective as well.
Well, I noticed you sold state-owned land to eliminate waste and generate revenue. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had about, I think it was about 5,400 acres that we were able to sell. I had a cow-calf operation with the Department of Corrections. We were not aware of that. Then to come to find out we were operating at a loss, that's, we need to get back to the core function of government. And as the bureaucracy continues to grow, the scope also grows with it. And that's when we start to see the inefficiencies.
Well, I tell you what, that is music to my soul, because, I've got a HERD Act, because it mimics what Harry Reid did in southern Nevada. He found out that Las Vegas was surrounded by BLM. You couldn't grow it. Yeah. And so what they did is they found out that the federal government has a propriety to look at what the land's used for. Does it have a purpose? And if not, it has to be sold. So I think there's a great opportunity there. Mr. Schatz, I want to touch base with you in regards to the The 2024 Prime Cuts Report recommends that the National Park Service, Forest Service, and BLM suspend federal land purchases until they effectively manage their currently owned land. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Do you generally agree that selling public land to states and local communities would eliminate unused assets, generate revenue, and provide an overall benefit to the federal government and to local communities?
Yes, Congressman, and it would generate about $15 billion over 5 years. 3 years. So there's a lot of land out there. In fact, the government probably doesn't even know what it owns.
Yes.
And it needs to get done.
The one thing I really want to make note of, and I get running out of time here, is the National Emergencies Act. We have spent $12 trillion over the last, since Bill Clinton, and it's 1/3 of our national debt. I would love to work with you in regards to cleaning these up, cleaning them out, and getting some aspects and assets back to the people. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes ranking member for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your consideration. Governor Reynolds, welcome, and your story is a very impressive one. I was the chairman of a county of 1.2 million people, 1/3 your population, and what you talk about resonates with somebody like me, hands-on, trying to make sure things work.
Right.
Iowa has a population, as I understand it, of 3.24 million people, and you've got a state workforce of 16,700 full-time employees. Is that correct? That's correct?
Yes.
Now, of course, with respect to the federal government, we're talking about 2.4 million. So it's not only a matter of scale. I mean, we're just talking about very different kinds of entities. That doesn't mean we can't learn from a state like Iowa, but I do think that the challenges we face at the federal level are, formidably different than what we face in my county or your state. As I said, doesn't mean we can't learn from it at all. And I listened carefully to you. Is my understanding correct that in order to effectuate the reforms you proudly championed today, you put on the payroll your wealthiest donor who came in and decided what agencies to abolish, which cabinet members were to go, how many people were to be fired, and other kinds of decision-making that was imbued with him or her. Is that how you did it in Iowa? Your wealthiest donor took that lead?
No, that's a complete misstatement. And first of all, we did it without any layoffs whatsoever. We made that commitment when we moved into our...
No layoffs?
Absolutely no layoffs.
Well,
I was able to eliminate 600 open positions that had been open for over a year. But through the transition process and what we've been able to accomplish, we did that right now without laying off any state employees.
Excuse me, because my time is limited, Governor, I don't mean to be interrupting you, but so the idea that your wealthiest donor kind of shepherded all of this is false.
That is false.
That's false. And you didn't lay off people. You tried, in fact, to move people around, or...
No, we made that commitment at the beginning of the process.
You made a commitment to that.
Because first of all, these were common sense changes. It was a realignment. It was highlighting the cabinet members that I thought should be in the cabinet. And making government operate more efficiently.
I think that's a very Iowan concept, too, common sense.
Yes.
And I like it. It's a non-ideological approach to governance. Professor Resch, would it be fair to say that what you've heard from Governor Reynolds is distinctly different from what we are experiencing in the first 15 days of the Trump administration with Elon Musk allegedly at the helm? And please speak loudly into that microphone so we can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
Quite simply, yes.
Very different.
It seems different, yes.
And would you say that it is unprecedented, unusual, and maybe even of dubious legality that so much authority and power has been vested in one individual who is an outside billionaire with no government experience other than benefiting from government contracts to wield this kind of power and influence and be firing people, laying off people, threatening to dismantle whole agencies, something that apparently Governor Reynolds actually actively tried to avoid to get political buy-in and to try to create a spirit of cooperation.
It seems to me that The actions that are being promulgated by DOJ lack legal authority. I am not a legal scholar. I am a scholar of executive politics and public management. But from what I can tell, this violates several legal authorities that are granted by Congress, not unilaterally by the President.
Governor Reynolds made a point of saying she worked with the legislature to effectuate the reforms, which always sounds to me like a pretty good idea. You want to work with your legislators. Here in Washington, there are laws on the books. For example, you may want to dismantle the Agency for International Development, but Congress created AID, that agency, in the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, and it seems to me that if you want to dismantle it or fold it into another agency, you got to come back to Congress and amend that act. Do you think that's a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement.
And likewise, when it comes to freezing funding for federal agencies, the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 governs impoundment, and the Supreme Court ruling during the Nixon years made it very clear that the power of the purse is exclusively vested in the legislative branch of Congress under the Constitution of the United States. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement, and it's the standing position of...
I'm sorry?
I said it's a fair statement, and it's the standing position of the courts.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of pearl clutching over the last several days from my colleagues across the aisle on Donald Trump, Secretary Rubio, the Department of Government Efficiency's plan to reorganize the U.S. Agency for International Development, or as we all now know, USAID. They're screaming about Elon Musk over there, but hey, George Soros and his boy are okay. They scream that we're all a threat to democracy when they've been systematically dismantling democracy before our eyes. They've been caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and there's no going back. So I would tell my colleagues across the other side of the aisle, take your salty tears and sit right back down. USAID has long strayed from its mission to effectively and efficiently administer aid to advance American interests. USAID has become rotten to its core, sacrificing the prudent advancing radical, sinister social and abroad. From discriminatory DEI initiatives to extreme gender ideology to marginalize real bona fide biological women. For decades, while homeless veterans sleep on our streets, our communities rebuild from natural disasters, and American families struggle to get by, USAID has pillaged and plundered the American treasury, essentially lighting American taxpayer dollars on fire, funding some of the dumbest, stupidest, just dumbest initiatives imaginable, all supported by the left, and that's why their party is crumbling. Today I'm going to expose some of the initiatives USAID has funded over the years and ask each of you a yes or no question. If you believe these expenditures of American taxpayer dollars put America first, so it'll be yes or no. USAID awarded $2 million to strengthen trans-led organizations to deliver gender-affirming health care in Guatemala. So to each of you this morning, does this advance the interests of American citizens paying for trannies in Guatemala to the tune of $2 million? Yes or no? Governor?
I have no position.
Of course you don't. Okay, USAID awarded over $750,000 to fund alleviating loneliness among migrant garment workers in India. Does this advance America's interests, Governor? No.
No. I have no position.
USAID awarded $1.5 million for providing a gender-sensitive response to migration at the Venezuelan border. Does this advance America's interests, Governor? No.
No. I have no position.
Does this advance the interest? Okay, so USAID awarded $4.3 million on October 1st, 2023 to a group to fund comprehensive health services for men having sex with other men in South Africa. Does this advance the interests of American citizens, Governor? No.
No. I have no position.
I bet you don't. Okay. USAID awarded $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities by promoting economic empowerment and opportunity for LGBTQI plus people in Serbia. Does this advance America's interests?
No.
No. Nope.
You have no idea, right? Okay. USAID awarded over $70,000 to a group to deliver a live musical event to promote the U.S. and Irish shared values of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Does this advance the interests of America?
No.
No.
No position.
No position or no clue. Okay, USAID awarded $1.5 million to fund strengthening community support structures to upscale LGBT rights advocacy in Jamaica. Does this advance our interests?
No.
No.
No position.
USAID awarded $28 million to a group to facilitate the economic insertion of Venezuelan migrants and refugees in Peru and Ecuador. Does this advance our interests?
No.
No.
No position.
Okay, USAID awarded $17.5 million to fund voluntary medical male circumcision overseas. Does this advance America's interests?
No.
No.
No position.
I don't know what circumcision overseas has to do with America First either. USAID awarded nearly $150,000 to fund HIV prevention services targeting men who have sex with men and transgender. Does this advance America's interests?
No.
No.
No position.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm limited to 5 minutes, but these are the programs Democrats are so desperate to save. Our foreign assistance system is badly broken, and this ends now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Chairman, parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, sir.
The gentlelady has used a phrase that is considered a slur in the LGBTQ community and the transgender community. And let me please finish without interruption. And
Tranny. I don't really care. You want penises in women's bathrooms, and I'm not going to have it.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Let the gentleman state his parliamentary inquiry.
To me, a slur is a slur, and here in the committee, a level of decorum requires us to try consciously to avoid slurs. You just heard the gentlelady actually actively, robustly repeat it, and I would just ask the chairman that she be counseled that we ought not to be engaged. We can have debate and policy discussion without offending human beings who are our fellow citizens. And so I would ask, as a parliamentary inquiry, whether the use of that phrase is not, in fact, a violation of the decorum rules.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to be counseled by a man over men and women's spaces or men who have mental health issues dressing as women. I'm not being counseled by some guy.
My inquiry is to the chairman,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Order. The inquiry is about decorum. Decorum is at the discretion of the chair.
That's
I will be honest,
Mr. Chairman.
with the ranking member. I'm not up to date on my politically correct LGBTQ terminology. We'll look into that and get back with you on that. I don't know what's offensive and what's not. I don't know much about pronouns or
I appreciate that,
offensive terms.
Mr. Chairman, we don't have to anymore.
So I thank the chair for his willingness to further engage in this matter.
All right. Chair now recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C. for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is only the second oversight hearing this Congress. The first one was about denigrating federal employees. This one is about denigrating federal employees, too. The Trump administration, including the Trump shadow government, seems intent on dismantling much of the federal government in violation of the Constitution, statutes, and regulations. The administration has relentlessly attacked federal employees, subjecting them to chaos and fear. The administration has imposed a hiring freeze, offered deferred resignation, fired employees, put employees on leave, effectively established Schedule F, and ended telework and remote work. Our two hearings so far are designed to lay the predicate to gut the nonpartisan federal civil service and to convert a significant portion of the remaining civil service into political appointees. Federal workers deserve praise for their expertise, dedication, and service, not derision. Thousands of civil federal servants have given their lives in the line of duty for the country. Instead of attacking federal employees, this committee should be considering bills to support the federal workforce, such as my bill to combat federal pay compression, or my bill to make permanent the free identity protection coverage that Congress required OPM to temporarily provide to individuals whose social service numbers were potentially compromised during the OPM data breaches. As I said at our last hearing, this committee can do better for the American people. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady, please yield to the ranking member.
Be glad to.
Chair recognizes ranking member.
I thank the gentlelady.
It was 2 minutes and 10 seconds.
I thank the gentlelady. Dr. Resch, could you elaborate just a little bit more on your answer to the previous question about sort of unelected, superannuated appointees who are not subject to the advice and consent of the United States Senate and have arrogated, apparently to themselves, either with or without the acquiescence or consent of the President himself, enormous powers. I mean, could you elaborate a little bit on that, on how unprecedented that is, and what are the dangers? What could go wrong with that? Why should we be concerned? And please speak louder into that microphone.
Yes, sir. So, the problems that can arise from a lack of accountability are many, particularly in the form of DOJ. We see a person that is leading it that is entangled in billions upon dollars of federal contracts, has an empire that is regulated across various industries, across various agencies. Having a person that is potentially influencing where workforce cuts might take place without any transparency as to the decision making potentiates conflicts of interest, particularly in those domains in which he is regulated or in which he has contracts with various agencies.
And interestingly enough, you heard Governor Reynolds' testimony about her process. This is not how they did it in Iowa.
No, I'm very impressed with her reforms, but it had nothing to do with politically connected individuals deciding.
And one of the cautions I heard you say is we've got to also be concerned about conflicts of interest when that same individual, imbued with all these powers,